Hey guys, today I'm reading pages 122 to 149 in the novel or pages 69 to 83 in the PDF. March 7th, 1992. Dear friend, girls are weird, and I don't mean that offensively. I just can't put it any other way. I have now gone on another date with Mary Elizabeth. In a lot of ways, it was similar to the dance, except we got to wear more comfortable clothes. She was the one who asked me out again, and I suppose that's okay. But I think if I'm going to start doing this from time to time, because I can't always hope to get asked. Also, if I do the asking, then I'll be sure to go out with the girl of my choice if she says yes. It's just so complicated. The good news is that I got to be the one who drove this time. I asked my father if I could borrow his car. It happened at the dinner table. What for? My dad gets protective of his car. Charlie's got a girlfriend, my sister said. She's not my girlfriend, I said. Who's this girl? My father asked. What's going on? My mother asked from the kitchen. Charlie wants to borrow the car, my dad replied. What for? My mother asked. That's what I'm trying to find out, my father said with a raised voice. No need to get snippy, my mother said. Sorry, said my father without meaning it, and then he turned back to me. So, tell me about this girl. So I told him a little bit about Mary Elizabeth, leaving out the part about the tattoo and belly button ring. He kind of smiled for a little while, trying to see if I was already guilty of something, and then he said yes, I could borrow his car. My mother came in with coffee. My father told her the whole story while I ate dessert. That night, as I finished my book, my father came in and sat on the edge of the bed. He lit a cigarette and started telling me about sex. He gave me this talk a few years ago, but it was more biological than that then. Now he was saying things like, I know I'm your old man, but you can't be too careful these days, and wear protection. And if she says no, then you have to assume she means it. Because if you force her to do something she doesn't want to do, then you're in big trouble, mister. And even if she says no and really means yes, then quite frankly, she's playing game and isn't worth the price of dinner. And if you need to talk to somebody, you can come to me. But if you don't want to do that for some reason, talk to your brother. And finally, I'm glad we had this talk. Then my father ruffled my hair, smiled, and left the room. I guess I should tell you that my father isn't like on television. Things like sex don't embarrass him. And he actually is very smart about them. I think he was especially happy because I used to kiss this boy in the neighborhood a lot when I was very little. And even though the psychiatrist said it was very natural for little boys and girls to explore things like that, I think my father was always afraid anyway. I guess that's natural, but I'm not sure why. Anyway, Mary Elizabeth and I went to see a movie downtown. It was what they call an art movie. Mary Elizabeth said it won as an award at some big film festival in Europe, and she thought that was impressive. As we waited for the movie to start, she said what a shame it was that so many people would go see a stupid Hollywood movie, but there were only a few people in this theater. Then she talked about how she couldn't wait to get out of there and go to college, and some people would appreciate things like that. And then she talked about how she couldn't wait to get out of here and go to college, where people appreciate things like that. Then the movie started. It was in a foreign language and had subtitles, which was fun because I had never read a movie before. The movie itself was very interesting, but I didn't think it was very good because I didn't really feel any different when it was over. But Mary Elizabeth felt different. She kept saying it was an articulate film, so articulate, and I guess it was. The thing is, I didn't even know what it said, even if it said it very well. Later, I drove us to this underground record store, and Mary Elizabeth gave me a tour. She loved this record store. She said it was the one place where she felt like herself. She said that before coffee shops were popular, there was nowhere for kids like her to go, except the big boy, and that was old until this year. She showed me the movie section and told me all about these cult filmmakers and people from France. Then she took me down to the import section and told me about real alternative music. Then she took me to a folk section and told me about girl bands like the Slits. She said she felt really bad she hadn't got me anything for Christmas and she wanted to make it up to me. And then she bought me a record of Billie Holiday and asked if I wanted to go to her house and listen to it. So I was sitting alone in her basement while she was upstairs getting us something to drink. And I looked around the room, which was very clean and smelled like people didn't live there. It had a fireplace with a mantel and golf trophies. And there was a television and a nice stereo. And then Mary Elizabeth came downstairs with 2 glasses and a bottle of brandy. She said that she hated everything her parents loved, except for brandy. She asked me to pour the drinks while she made a fire. She was very excited, too, which was strange because she's never like that. She kept talking about how much she loves fires and how she wanted to marry a man and live in Vermont someday, which was strange, too, because Mary Elizabeth never talks about things like that. When she finished the fire, she put on the record, and she kind of danced over to me. She said she felt very warm and not in the temperature sense. The music started, and she clinked my glass and said cheers and took a sip of brandy. Brandy's very good, by the way, but it was better at the Secret Santa party. We finished the first glasses very quickly. My heart was beating really fast, and I was starting to get nervous. She handed me another glass of brandy and touched my hand very softly when she did it. Then she slipped her leg over mine, and I watched it just dangle there. Then I felt her hand on the back of my neck, just kind of moving slowly, and my heart started beating crazy. Do you like the record? She asked real quiet. Very much. I really did too. It was beautiful. Charlie? Uh-huh. Do you like me? Uh-huh. You know what I mean. Uh-huh. Are you nervous? Uh-huh. Don't be nervous. Okay. And that's when I felt her other hand. It started at my knee and worked its way up the side of my leg to my hip and stomach. And then she took her leg off mine and kind of sat on my lap facing me. She looked right into my eyes and she never blinked, not once. Her face looked warm and different, and she leaned down and started kissing my neck and ears, and then my cheeks, and then my lips, and everything kind of melted away. She took my hand and slid it up her sweater, and I couldn't believe what was happening to me, or what breasts felt like, or later what they looked like, or how difficult bras are. After we had done everything you can do from the stomach up, I lay down on the floor, and Mary Elizabeth put her head on my chest. We both breathed very slowly and listened to the music and the fire crack. When the last song was over, I felt her breath on my chest. Charlie? Uh-huh. Do you think I'm pretty? I think you're very pretty. Really? Really. And then she held on a little tighter, and for the next half hour, Mary Elizabeth didn't talk much, and all I could do was lie there and think about how much her voice changed when she asked me if she was pretty, and how much she changed when I answered, and how Sam said she didn't like things like that, and how my arm was beginning to hurt. Thank God we heard the automatic garage door open when we did. Love always, Charlie. March 28th, 1992. Dear friend, it's finally starting to get a little warm here, and the people are being nicer in the hallways. Not to me especially, just in a general way. I wrote a paper about Walden for Bill, and this time I did it different. I didn't write a book report. I wrote a report pretending that I myself was by myself near a lake for 2 years. I pretended that I lived off the land and had insights. To tell you the truth, I kind of like the idea of doing that just right now. Ever since that night at the party with Mary Elizabeth, everything has been different. It started out that Monday in school when Sam and Patrick looked at me with big grins. Mary Elizabeth had told them about the night we spent together, which I didn't really want her to do, but Sam and Patrick thought it was great, and they were really happy for both of us, Sam kept saying. I can't believe I didn't think of it before. You guys are great together. I think Mary Elizabeth thinks so too, because she's been acting completely different. She's nice all the time, but it doesn't feel right. I don't know how to describe it. It's like we'll be having a cigarette outside with Sam and Patrick at the end of the day, and we'll be all talking about something, but until it's time to go. And then when I get home, Mary Elizabeth will call me right away and ask me, what's up? And I don't know what to say because the only thing new in my life is my walk home, which isn't a lot, but I describe the walk anyway. And then she starts talking, and she doesn't stop for a long time. She's been doing this all week, that and picking lint off my clothes. At one point 2 days ago, she was talking about books, and she included a lot of books I had read. And when I told her that I had read them, she asked me very long questions that were really just her ideas with a question mark put at the end. And the only thing I could say was either yes or no. And there was honestly no room to say anything else. After that, she started talking about her plans for college, which I had heard before, so I put down the phone and I went to the bathroom. And when I came back, she was still talking. I know that was the wrong thing to do, but I thought that if I didn't take a break, I would do something even worse, like yell or hang up the phone. She also keeps talking about the Billie Holiday record she bought for me, and she says she wants me to explore all these great things. And to tell you the truth, I don't really want to be exposed to all these great things if it means I'll have to hear Mary Elizabeth talk about all the great things she exposed me to all the time. It almost feels like one of the three things involved: Mary Elizabeth, me, and the great things. And the first one matters to Mary Elizabeth. Only the first one matters to Mary Elizabeth. I don't understand that. I would give somebody a record if they could love the record, but not so they would always know that I gave it to them. Then there was the dinner. Since the holidays were over, my mom asked if I would like to have Sam and Patrick over for dinner like she promised. After I told her, they said she had great taste in clothing. I was so excited. I told Sam and Patrick, and then we made plans for Saturday night. And about 2 hours later, Mary Elizabeth walked up to me in the hall and said, "What time Sunday?" I don't know what to do. It was just Sam and Patrick, and that was the whole idea from the beginning. I never even invited Mary Elizabeth. I guess I know that why she assumed she would be invited, but she never even waited to see, or even drop a hint or anything. So at the dinner where I wanted my mom and dad to see how nice and great Sam and Patrick were, Mary Elizabeth talked the whole time. And it wasn't all her fault. My mom and dad asked her more questions than they asked Sam or Patrick. And I guess because I'm going on dates with Mary Elizabeth, and that is more curious to them than my friends are. I guess that makes sense, but still, it's like they never got to meet Sam and Patrick. And that was the whole point. By the time dinner was over and they all left, all my mom said was that Mary Elizabeth was smart, and all my dad said that my girlfriend was pretty. And they didn't say anything about Sam or Patrick. And all I wanted from the whole night was for them to know my friends. That was very important to me. Sex things are weird too. It's like after that first night, we had this pattern where we basically do what we did the first time, but there's no fire or Billie Holiday record because we're in a car and everything is rushed. And maybe this is the way that things are supposed to be, but it just doesn't feel right. My sister's been reading all these books about women ever since she told her ex-boyfriend that the pregnancy was a false alarm, and he wanted to get back together, and she said no. So I asked her about Mary Elizabeth, leaving out the sex part, because I knew she could be neutral about it, especially since she stayed clear of the dinner. My sister said Mary Elizabeth is suffering from low self-esteem, and I told her that she said the same thing about Sam back in November when she started dating Craig, and Sam is completely different. Everything can't be about low self-esteem, can it? My sister tried to clarify things. She said by introducing me to all these great things, Mary Elizabeth gained a superior position that she wouldn't need if she was confident about herself. She also said that people who try to control situations all the time are afraid that if they don't, nothing will work out the way that they want. And I don't know if this is right or not, but it makes me sad regardless. Not for Mary Elizabeth or for me, just in general. Because I started to think that I didn't know who Mary Elizabeth was after all. I'm not saying she was lying to me, but she just acts so different before I got to know her. And if she really isn't like she was at the beginning, I wish she could have just said so. And maybe she's like she was at the beginning and I just didn't realize it. I just don't want to be another thing Mary Elizabeth is in charge of. I asked my sister what I should do, and she said the best thing was to be honest about my feelings. My psychiatrist says the same thing. And then I felt really sad because I thought maybe I was different from how Mary Elizabeth originally saw me too. And maybe I was lying by not telling her that it was hard to listen to her all the time without getting to say anything back. But I was just trying to be nice like Sam said I should. I don't know where I went wrong. I tried to call my brother about this, but his roommate said he was really busy with school, so I decided not to leave a message because I didn't want to distract him. The only thing I did was mail my report about Walden to him so he could share it with his girlfriend. And then maybe if they had time, they could read it and we could talk about it. And I would have the chance to ask them both what to do about Mary Elizabeth since they were going out in a good way and would know how to make things work. And even if we didn't get to talk about it, I would still love to meet my brother's girlfriend, even on the phone. I did get to see her once on a VCR tape of one of my brother's football games, but it's really not the same thing, even though she's very beautiful, but not in an unconventional way. I don't know why I'm saying all this. I just wish Mary Elizabeth would ask me questions other than what's up. Love always, Charlie. April 18th, 1992. Dear friend, I have made a terrible mess of things. I really have. I feel terrible about it. Patrick said the best thing I could do is just stay away for a while. It all started last Monday. Mary Elizabeth came to school with a book of poems by a famous poet named E.E. Cummings. The story behind the book was that she saw a movie that talked about one poem that compares this woman's hands to flowers and rain. She thought it was so beautiful that she went out and bought the book. She has read it a lot of times since, and she said she wanted me to have my own copy. Not the copy she bought, but a new one. All day, she told me to show everyone the book. And I know I should have been grateful because it was a very nice thing to do. But I wasn't grateful. I wasn't grateful at all. Don't get me wrong, I acted like I was, but I wasn't. To tell you the truth, I was starting to get mad. Maybe if she could have given me the copy of the book that she bought for herself, it would have been different. Or maybe if she had just hand-copied the rain poem she loved on a piece of paper. But definitely, if she didn't make me show the book to everyone we know. Maybe I should have been honest then, but it didn't feel like the right time. When I left school that day, I didn't go home because I just couldn't talk to her on the phone, and my mother is not very adroit liar about things like that. So instead, I walked to the area where all the shops and video stores are. I went straight to the bookstore. And when the woman behind the counter asked me if I needed any help, I opened my bag, and I returned the book Mary Elizabeth bought me. I didn't do anything with the money. It just sat in my pocket. When I walked home, all I could think of was what a terrible thing that I had just did, and I started crying. And by the time I walked in the front door, I was crying so much that my sister stopped watching television to talk to me. When I told her what I did, she drove me back to the bookstore because I was too messy to drive, and I got the book back, which made me feel a little bit better. When Mary Elizabeth asked me where I'd been all day on the phone that night, I told her that I went to the store with my sister. And when she asked if I bought her something nice, I said I did. I didn't even think she was serious, but I said it anyway. I just felt so bad about almost returning her book. I spent the next hour on the phone listening her talk about the book, and then we said goodnight. And then I went downstairs to ask my girlfriend if she could drive me to the store again so I could get Mary Elizabeth something nice. My sister told me to drive myself, and that I had better start being honest with Mary Elizabeth about how I feel. Maybe I should have then, but it just didn't seem like the right time. The next day in school, I gave Mary Elizabeth the gift that I drove to buy her. It was a new copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, and the first thing that Mary Elizabeth said was, "That's original." I just reminded myself that she didn't say it mean, she wasn't making fun of me, she wasn't comparing or criticizing, she really wasn't, believe me. So I just explained to her how Bill gives me special books to read outside of class and how To Kill a Mockingbird was the first one and how it was special to me. And then she said, "Thank you, that's very sweet." But then she went on to explain how she had read it 3 years earlier and thought it was overrated, and how they turned it into a black and white film with famous actors like Gregory Peck and Robert Duvall that won an Academy Award for the screenplay writer. And I just kind of put my feelings away somewhere after that. I left school, walked around, and didn't get home until 1 o'clock in the morning. When I explained to my father why, he told me to act like a man. The next day in school, Mary Elizabeth asked where I had been the day before. I told her that I had bought a pack of cigarettes, went to the Big Boy, and spent the entire day reading the E.E. Cummings books and eating club sandwiches. I knew I was safe saying that because she would never ask me any questions about the book, and I was right. After she got done talking about it that time, I don't think I'd ever really need to read it for myself, even if I wanted to. I definitely think I should have been honest then, but to tell you the truth, I was getting as mad as I used to get playing sports, and it was starting to scare me. Luckily, Easter vacation was starting on Friday, and it was distracting things a little bit. Bill gave me Hamlet to read for the break. He said I would need the free time to really concentrate on the play. I guess I don't need to say who wrote it. The only advice Bill gave me was to think about the main characters in terms of the other main characters in the books I've read thus far. He said not to get caught up thinking that the play was too fancy. So on Good Friday yesterday, we had a special showing of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. What made it special was the fact that everyone knew it was the beginning of Easter vacation, and a lot of kids were still wearing their suits and dresses from Mass. It reminded me of Ash Wednesday in school, when the kids come in with thumbprints on their foreheads. It always adds an air of excitement. After the show, Craig invited us all back to his apartment to drink wine and listen to the White Album. After the record was over, Patrick suggested we all play Truth or Dare, a game that he loves to play when he's buzzed. Guess who chose Dare over Truth all night? Me. I just didn't want to tell Mary Elizabeth the truth because of a game. Well, it was working out pretty well most of the night. The dares were like chug a beer, but then Patrick gave me a dare. I don't think he even knew what he was doing, but he gave it to me anyway. Kiss the prettiest girl in the room on the lips. That's when I chose to be honest. In retrospect, I probably could not have picked a worse time. The silence started after I stood up, since Mary Elizabeth was sitting right next to me, and by the time I knelt down in front of Sam and kissed her, the silence was unbearable. It wasn't a romantic kiss. It was friendly, like when I played Rocky and she played Janet, but it didn't matter. I could say that it was the wine or the beer that I had chugged. I could also say that I had forgotten the time Mary Elizabeth asked me if I thought she was pretty, but I would be lying. The truth is that when Patrick dared me, I knew that if I kissed Mary Elizabeth, I would be lying to everyone, including Sam, including Patrick, including Mary Elizabeth. And I just couldn't do it anymore, even if it was part of a game. After the silence, Patrick did his very best to salvage the evening. The first thing he said was, "Well, isn't this awkward?" But it didn't work. Mary Elizabeth walked quickly out of the room and into the bathroom. Patrick told me later that she didn't want anyone to see her cry. Sam followed her, but before she completely left the room, she turned to me and said, very serious and dark, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" And it was the look on her face when she said it, and how much she meant it. And it suddenly made everything seem like it really was. I felt terrible, just terrible. Patrick immediately stood up and took me out of Craig's apartment. We walked to the street, and the only thing I was aware of was that it was cold. I said that I should go back inside and apologize, and Patrick said, "No, I'll get our coats. You just stay here." When Patrick left me outside, I started to cry. It was real and panicky, and I couldn't stop it. When Patrick came back, I said, really crying, "I really think I should go apologize." Patrick shook his head. "Believe me, you do not want to go in there." Then he jiggled the car keys in front of my face and said, "Come on, I'll take you home." In the car, I told Patrick everything that had been going on, about the record and about the book and about To Kill a Mockingbird and how Mary Elizabeth never asked any questions. And all Patrick said was, "It's too bad you're not gay." And that made me stop crying a little bit. "Then again, if you were gay, I would never date you. You're a mess." And that made me start laughing a little bit. And I thought Brad was a fuck up. Jesus. And that made me laugh a lot more. And then he turned on the radio, and we drove through the tunnels back home. And when he dropped me off, Patrick told me the best thing I could do was keep away for a little while. And I guess I already told you that. He said that when he knew more, he'd give me a call. Thanks, Patrick. Don't mention it. And then I said, you know, Patrick, if I were gay, I'd want to date you. I don't know why I said it, but it seemed right. Patrick just smiled cocky and said, of course. And then he peeled out down the road. When I lay down in bed that night, I put on the Billie Holiday record, and I started reading the book of E. E. Cummings' poems. And after I read the poem that compares the women's hands to flowers and rain, I put the book down and went to the window. I stared at my reflection and the trees behind it for a long time, not thinking anything, not feeling anything, not hearing the record, for hours. Something really is wrong with me, and I don't know what it is. Love always, Charlie. Dear friend, April 26, 1992. Nobody has called me since that night, and I don't blame them. I spent the whole vacation reading Hamlet. Bill was right. It was much easier to think of the kid in the play like the other characters I've read about so far. It also helped me while I was trying to figure out what is wrong with me. It didn't give me any answers necessarily, but it was helpful to know that somebody else has been through it, especially someone who lived such a long time ago. I did call Mary Elizabeth, and I told her that I'd been listening to the record every night and reading the E. E. Cummings book, and she just said, "It's too late, Charlie." And I would have explained that I didn't want to start going on dates again, but I was just doing these things as a friend, but I knew that it would have only made things worse, so I didn't. And I just said, "I'm sorry." And I really was sorry, and I know she believed me, but when that didn't make any difference, then there was nothing but a bad silence on the phone. I knew that it was too late. Patrick did call me, and all he could say was that Craig got really angry at Sam about me and I should keep staying away until things got clear. I asked him if he'd like to go out, just him and me. He said he'd be too busy with Brad and family things, but he tried to call me if he could find some time. So far he hasn't. I would tell you about Easter Sunday with my family, but I've already told you about Thanksgiving and Christmas, and there really isn't much of a difference. Except that my father got a raise and my mother didn't because she doesn't get paid for housework, and my sister stopped reading those self-esteem books because she met a new boy. My brother did come home, and when I asked him if his girlfriend read my report on Walden, he said no because she broke up with him when she found out he was cheating on her. That happened a while ago. So I asked him if he'd read it himself, and he said that he hadn't because he was too busy. He said he would try to read it over the vacation. So far he hasn't. So I went to visit my Aunt Helen, and for the first time in my life, it didn't help. I even tried to follow my old plan and remember all the details about the last time I'd had a great week, but that didn't help either. I know that I brought this all on myself. I know that I deserve this. I'd do anything not to be this way. I'd do anything to make it up to everyone, but not to have to see a psychiatrist who explains to me about being passive aggressive, and not to have to take the medicine he gives me, which is too expensive for my dad, and not to have to talk about bad memories with him or be nostalgic about bad things. I just wish that God or my parents or Sam or my sister or somebody would just tell me what is wrong with me and just tell me how to be different in a way that makes sense, to make all of this go away and disappear. I know it's wrong because it's my responsibility. And I know that things get worse because they always get better before they get better, because that's what my psychiatrist says, which this is worse than that. I know that's wrong because it's my responsibility. And I know that things get worse before they get better, because that's what my psychiatrist says. But this is a worse that feels too big. After a week of not talking to anyone, I finally called Bob. I know that's wrong, but I didn't know what else to do. I asked him if he had anything I could buy. He said he had a 1/4 ounce of pot left. So I took some of my Easter money and I bought it. I've been smoking it all the time ever since. Love always, Charlie. Part 4. April 29th, 1992. Dear friend, I wish I could report that it's getting better, but unfortunately it isn't. It's hard too because we've started school again and I can't go to the places where I used to go. And it can't be like what it was, and I wasn't ready to say goodbye just yet. To tell you the truth, I've just been avoiding everything. I walk around school hallways and I look at people, I look at the teachers and wonder why they're here, if they like their jobs or us. And I wonder how smart they were when they were 15, but not in a mean way, in a curious way. It's like looking at all the students and wondering who had their hearts broken that day, and how they are able to cope with having 3 quizzes and a book report on top of that, and wondering who did the heartbreaking and wondering why. Especially since I know that if they went to another school, the person who had their heart broken would have had their heart broken by somebody else. So why does it have to be so personal? And if I went to another school, I would never have known Sam or Patrick or Mary Elizabeth or anyone except my family. I can tell you one thing that happened. I was in the shopping mall because that's where I go lately, for the last couple of weeks. I've been going there every day trying to figure out why people go there. It's kind of a personal project. There was this one little boy. He might have been 4 years old, I'm not sure. He was crying really hard, and he kept screaming for his mom. He must have been lost. And then I saw this older kid who was maybe 17. I think he went to a different school because I'd never seen him before. Anyway, this older kid, who was really tough looking with a leather jacket and long hair and everything, went up to the little boy and asked him what his name was. The little boy answered and stopped crying. And then the older kid walked away with the little boy. A minute later, I heard the intercom say to the mom that her boy was at the information desk. So I went to the information desk to see what would happen. I guess the mom had been searching for the little boy for a long time because she came running up to the information desk, and when she saw the little boy, she started crying. She held him tightly and told him never to run off again. Then she thanked the older kid who had helped, and all the older kid said was, "Next time, just watch him a little fucking better." And then he walked away. And the man with the mustache behind the information desk was speechless, and so was the mom. And the little boy just wiped his nose, looked at his mom, and said, "French fries." The mom looked down at the little boy and nodded, and they left. So I followed them. They went to the place where the food stands are, and they got French fries. And the little boy was smiling and getting ketchup all over himself. And the mom kept wiping his face in between drags off her cigarette. And I kept looking at the mom, trying to imagine what she must have looked like when she was young, if she was married, if her little boy was an accident or planned, and if that made a difference. I saw other people there, old men sitting alone, young girls with blue eyeshadow and awkward jaws, little kids who looked tired, fathers in nice coats who looked even more tired, kids working behind the counters of food places who looked like they hadn't had the will to live for hours. The machines kept opening and closing. People kept giving money and getting their change. And it all felt very unsettling to me. So I decided to find another place to go and figure out why people go there. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of places like that. And I don't know how much longer I can keep going without a friend. I used to be able to do it very easily, but that was before I knew what having a friend was like. It was much easier not to know things when sometimes. And to have French fries with your mom be enough. The only person I've really talked to in the last 2 weeks was Susan, the girl who used to go with Michael back in middle school when she had braces. I saw her standing in the hall, surrounded by a group of boys I didn't know. They were all laughing and making sex jokes, and Susan was doing her best to laugh along with them. When she saw me approaching the group, her face went ashen, and it was almost like she didn't want to remember what she was like 12 months ago, and she certainly didn't want the boys to know that she knew me and used to be my friend. The whole group got quiet and stared at me, but I didn't even notice them. I just looked at Susan, and all I said was, "Do you ever miss him?" And I didn't say it mean or accusingly. I just wanted to know if somebody else remembered Michael. To tell you the truth, I was stoned in a bad way, and I couldn't get the question out of my mind. Susan was at a loss. She didn't know what to do. These were the first words we had spoken since the end of last year, and I guess it wasn't fair of me to ask her in a group like that, but I never see her by herself anymore, and I really needed to know. At first, I thought her blank expression was the result of surprise, but after it didn't go away for a long time, I knew that it wasn't. It suddenly dawned on me that if Michael were still around, Susan probably wouldn't be going out with him anymore. But maybe she's a bad person or shallow or mean. Not because she's a bad person or shallow or mean, but because things change and friends leave and life doesn't stop for anybody. I'm sorry I bothered you, Susan. I'm just having a tough time, that's all. Have a good one, I said, and walked away. God, that kid's such a fucking freak, I heard one of the boys whisper as I was halfway down the hall. He said it more factually than mean, and Susan didn't correct him. And I don't know if I would have corrected him myself these days. Love always, Charlie. May 2nd, 1992. Dear friend, a few days ago I went to see Bob to buy more pot. I should probably say that I keep forgetting Bob doesn't go to school with us. Probably because he watches more television than anyone I know, and he's great with trivia. You should see him talk about Mary Tyler Moore. It's kind of spooky. Bob has this very specific way of living. He says he takes a shower every other day. He weighs his stash daily. He says that when you're smoking a cigarette with someone and you have a lighter, you should light their cigarette first. But if you have matches, you should light your cigarette first, so you breathe in the harmful sulfur instead of them. He said it's the polite thing to do. He also said it's bad luck to have 3 on a match. He heard that from his uncle who fought in Vietnam. Something about how 3 cigarettes was enough time for the enemy to know where you were. Bob says that when you're alone and you light a cigarette and the cigarette is only halfway lit, that means somebody is thinking about you. He also says that when you find a penny, it's only lucky if it's heads up. He says the best thing to do is find a lucky penny when you're with someone and give the other person the good luck. He believes in karma. He's also loves to play cards. Bob goes part-time to the local community college. He wants to be a chef. He is an only child, and his parents are never home. He says it used to bother him a lot when he was younger, but not so much anymore. The thing about Bob is that when you first meet him, he's really interesting because he knows about cigarette rules and pennies and Mary Tyler Moore. But after you've known him for a while, he starts to repeat these things. In the last few weeks, he hasn't said anything I haven't heard from him before, and that's what made it such a shock when he told me what happened last night. Basically, Brad's father caught Brad and Patrick together. I guess that Brad's father didn't know about his son because when he caught them, Brad's father started beating Brad, and not a slap kind of beating, a belt kind, the real kind. Patrick told Sam, who told Bob, that he had never seen anything like it, and I guess that was bad. He wanted to say, "Stop, and you're killing him." He even wanted to hold Brad's father down, but he just froze, and Brad kept yelling, "Get out," to Patrick. And finally Patrick just did. That was last week, and Brad still hasn't come home. Brad still hasn't come to school. Everyone thinks he might have been sent to military school or something. Nobody knows for sure about anything. Patrick tried calling once, but when Brad's father answered, he just hung up. Bob said Patrick's in a bad shape, and I can't tell you how sad I felt when he told me because I wanted to call Patrick and be his friend and help him. But I don't know if I should call him because of what he said about things waiting until things got clear. The thing was, I couldn't think about anything else. So on Friday, I went to Rocky Horror Picture Show. I waited until the movie had already started before I went into the theater. I didn't want to ruin the show for everybody. I just wanted to see Patrick play Frankenfurter, just like he always does, because I knew that if I saw that, I knew that he would be okay, just like my sister getting mad at me for smoking cigarettes. I sat in the back row and looked at the stage. It was still a couple of scenes before Frankenfurter enters, and that's when I saw Sam playing Janet. And I miss her so much, especially when I saw Mary Elizabeth playing Magenta. It was all very hard to watch. But then Patrick finally came on as Frankenfurter, and he was great. He was actually better than ever in a lot of ways, and it was just so nice to see all my friends. I left before the movie was over. I drove home listening to some of the songs that we listened to during those times when we felt infinite, and I pretended they were in the car with me. I even talked out loud. I told Patrick how I thought he was great. I asked Sam about Craig. I told Mary Elizabeth that I was sorry and how much I really loved the E.E. Cummings book and wanted to ask her questions about it. But then I stopped because it was starting to make me sad too. I also thought that if anybody saw me talking out loud when I was alone in the car, their looks might convince me that something's wrong, that the something that's wrong with me might be even worse than I thought. When I got home, my sister was watching a movie with her new boyfriend. There isn't even much to say other than his name is Eric and he has short hair and is a junior. Eric had rented the movie. After I shook hands with him, I asked them about the movie because I didn't recognize it except for an actor who used to be on a TV show and I couldn't remember his name. My sister said, "It's stupid, you wouldn't like it." And I said, "What's it about?" And she said, "Come on, Charlie, it's almost over." I said, "Would it be okay if I watched the end?" She said, "You can watch it when we're done." And I said, "Well, how about I watch the end with you and then I can rewind it and watch up to the point I started watching with you?" And that's when she paused the movie. "Can't you take a hint?" "I suppose not." "We want to be alone, Charlie?" "Oh, I'm sorry." And to tell you the truth, I knew she wanted to be alone with Eric, but I really wanted to have some company. And I knew it wasn't fair, though, to ruin her time just because I miss everybody. So I just said goodnight and left. I went up to my room and started reading the new book Bill gave me. It's called The Stranger. And Bill said that it's very easy to read, but very hard to read well. I have no idea what he means, but I like the book so far. Love always, Charlie.